Citizen FM, Abuja.
The time is 6 o'clock. Welcome to Citizen FM News at 6. I am Didi, and first, the highlight of our top stories. Federal government inaugurates committee to tackle flood disaster. INEC swears in 19 resident electoral commissioners. Ethiopia civil war parties agree to end hostilities. A warm welcome to Citizen FM News at 6. I am Didi Eno. The federal government has endorsed a white paper on the global climate change concerns and Nigeria's interest to be presented at the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Egypt. This is contained in a statement signed by the PURTTRU founder, Monica Madwike, in Lagos. The white paper, led by Pocho, is a collaborative effort with the Federal Ministry of Environment, Power, Trade and Investment, Energy Commission of Nigeria, and the Office of the Deputy President of the Senate. It said the objectives of the white paper is to inform the international community and Nigeria's trade partners on how the country's national concerns on trade, energy and climate change can be harmonized with global concerns in a manner that ensures that Nigeria's interests are seen as global interests. Minister of Environment Mohammed Abdullahi said the white paper explores the different nexus between trade and climate change. The federal government has inaugurated the Presidential Committee for the Development of a Comprehensive Plan of Action for Preventing Flood Disasters in the country. President Buhari had mandated the Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu, to fashion out ways of preventing flood disaster in Nigeria within 90 days. Adamu said it was no longer news that the recent 2022 floods had thrown several communities into hardship, submerged homes, and destroyed properties estimated at billions of naira. He noted that flooding incidents in Nigeria had been caused mainly by overflow of silted rivers and poor drainage systems from localized rainfall, generating flash flooding in urban areas. Still unflawed, Bayelsa State Governor Doye Diri is insisting the state has not received a fair treatment from the federal government since the commencement of floods that ravaged the state. The governor, who repeated his earlier statement in an interview in Abuja, said the federal government paid lip service to the flooding situation, especially in response to providing relief materials to cushion the effects. Diri said, considering Bayelsa's contribution to the nation's economy, the response of the federal government to the flood situation in the state was not commiserate.
There is nothing we can do from our end to actually assuage the feelings of the people to the level of their being very satisfied with us with very meager resources that we have. And we believe that this is the time we needed the federal government, who we see as a father to us. And this is the fourth week. It's about a month now that Bayelsa has been sitting under waters. So I have made calls, I have appealed, and up until this moment, we don't have one federal government very senior official in the mold of maybe the president, the vice president, or the minister, just to give us hope, encourage us, and deploy the federal might to our state to say we stand with you. And that would have been a very big encouragement and hope for the people of the state.
He's also speaking on his earlier call for a state of emergency. The governor said that he had been overtaken by time as the flood has started to recede gradually.
And I've officially communicated the level of destruction of lives and properties by the flood to Mr. President, and several other bodies have communicated officially to foreign embassies, have communicated to all relevant federal offices that are to deal with this. I've even communicated to the National Assembly. So at that point, we actually needed the state of emergency. But as we speak today, the flood is receding. So, though very gradually, but I think that now we are beginning to come back to our normal lives, and the state of emergency for now may not be useful again.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Farouk, says from the assessment carried out so far by her ministry, Bayelsa State is not among the top 10 most affected states in the recent floods. The minister said instead, Jigawa is ranked number 1 most hit state. According to the ministry, the criteria used to arrive at the conclusion are based on the following indices: the number of deaths recorded and displaced persons per state, number of injuries, partially damaged, houses totally damaged, farmlands partially and totally damaged. The Nigeria Red Cross Society is appealing to Nigerians in public and private sector for donation in aid of its flood disaster effort to alleviate the massive human suffering of victims across the country. Right now, the Red Cross manages several IDP camps across the country, providing displaced persons with practical and actionable instructions that they can use to seek better health outcomes and to also mitigate the effects of the flooding so far. As things stand now, the flooding has resulted in over 600 fatalities and more than 2,400 people injured across the country. Beyond its direct disastrous effects, the flood have triggered a cholera outbreak in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Barely 10 days ago, the NRC launched an emergency appeal to raise 13 million Swiss francs to support up to 500,000 people and to also focus on the provision of health, care, water, sanitation, hygiene promotion, search, and rescue. The NRC says it needs these funds to scale up these activities across the 37 branches of the organization.
At least 3 million people have been affected. The states most affected include Kebbi, Kogi, Benue, Adamawa, Bayelsa, Anambra, Cross River, Ondo, and Delta, with Bayelsa and Kogi and parts of Ondo virtually submerged. The flooding has resulted in over 600 fatalities and more than 2,500 injured across the country thus far. Beyond its direct impact of destruction of habitats and livelihoods and displacements, the floods have triggered diverse health emergencies in many states. This has been confirmed by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The reality is that risks are increasing. Millions of people are facing dire potable water shortages. Many water points have diminished in quality, heightening the risk of waterborne diseases and increasing the risk of skin and eye infections as families are forced to ration their water use, prioritizing drinking and cooking over and
Basically, floods are damaging homes, infrastructure, destroying farmlands, and displacing peoples from their communities. Also, the lack of access to proper sanitation, hygiene facilities, and the contamination of water are likely to further increase the spread of cholera and other waterborne diseases. Latest reports now confirm that at least 2.8 million people have been affected so far across the country. Latest reports now confirm that at least 2.8 million people have been affected and at least 612 lives have been lost and more than 2,500 people have been injured. 2 million people have fled or were evacuated from high-risk areas, carrying only belongings that they can take with them. Troops of Operation Hadinkai and Hadarin Daji have eliminated no fewer than 44 terrorists and apprehended over 50 in northeast and northwest in the last 2 weeks, the defense headquarters say. The head director, Defense Media Operations Major General Musa Dambadami made this known at a bi-weekly news briefing on the operations of the armed forces in Abuja on Thursday. In the northeast, Damadami said troops of Operation Harding Kai had between October 20 and November 2 apprehended 27 suspected Boko Haram and Islamic State of West Africa province terrorists and neutralized 19. Damadami added that the troops recovered large cache of arms and ammunition of different categories, as well as other logistics supplies during the period. According to him, the air component had on October 21 conducted air interdiction mission on a terrorist convoy movement along Tumbung Aliyu near Lake Chad, a terrorist location southwest of Maiduguri. He said the strikes eliminated several terrorists as well as 7 gun trucks and other materials.
In conjunction with Civilian Joint Task Force, as custom internal displaced persons camp, Shuari Town in Maiduguri local government area of Borno State, arrested one suspect in possession of 67 permanent voters card. Suspect is currently in troops custody for further interrogation. Also, in the same camp, a non-terrorist, Mr. Lawal Yashin, who attempted to escape upon sighting troops, was neutralized. During the period in focus, a total of 145 Boko Haram terrorists and their family, comprising of 30 adult male, 33 adult female, and 82 children.
And also other stories. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mahmoud Yakubu, has sworn in 19 newly appointed resident electoral commissioners. At the INEC headquarters in Abuja, Yakubu charged the newly sworn-in recs to devote their loyalty to Nigeria and not to compromise the integrity of the commission. He also deployed the 19 recs to their geopolitical zones but outside their state of origin, in line with INEC's regulation that forbids a commissioner from serving in his or her own home state. 5 of the 19 recs are returning commissioners who were reappointed by President Buhari and approved by the Senate. And now to report on the foreign scene, Ethiopia's warring sides have formally agreed to a permanent cessation of hostilities, an African Union Special Envoy said on Wednesday, bringing hope to an imminent end to a 2-year war that has displaced millions and threatened to destabilize a swath of the continent. Nigeria's former President Olusegun Obasanjo, in the first briefing on the peace talks in Pretoria, South Africa's administrative capital, also said Ethiopia's government and Tigray authorities had agreed on an orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament. Abiy Ahmed, the Ethiopia's Prime Minister, described the agreement as monumental. Abiy added that he wanted to thank the brave members of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the courageous people of the nation that stood a testing period.
It's the beginning of a new dawn for Ethiopia, for the Horn of Africa, and indeed for Africa as a whole. The two parties in the Ethiopian conflict have formally agreed to the cessation of hostilities as well as to systematic, orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament, restoration of law and order, restoration of services, unhindered access to humanitarian supplies, protection of civilians, especially women, children, and other vulnerable groups, among other areas of agreement.
Meanwhile, world leaders are reacting with cautious optimism after the announcement of a peace deal and a ceasefire between warring parties in northern Ethiopia's Tigray region. It represents an important step towards peace. That's according to U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price. The U.S. applauds the parties in their commitment to peace in reaching this agreement. The United States remains committed to supporting the African Union-led progress and process, as well as peace, and to partnering to advance peace in northern Ethiopia.
Simply remain in silence, because silence is complicity. I believe the voices excusing or calling for violence and intimidation
is the beginning of a new dawn.
This could mean the end of the... Simply remain in silence, because silence is complicity. I believe...
Joe Biden has Americans to protect democracy, or has asked Americans to protect democracy at the ballot box in the midterm elections as he called for an end to political violence. The president compared the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband to the attack by a pro-Trump mob on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, as he slammed the one-term president for refusing to accept the results of the 2020 elections and putting loyalty to himself ahead of loyalty to the Constitution.
Or simply remain in silence, because silence is complicity. I believe the voices excusing or calling for violence and intimidation are a distinct minority in America, but they're loud and they are determined. We have to be more determined. All of us who reject political violence and voter intimidation, and I believe that's the overwhelming majority of the American people, all of us.
Israeli election officials were tallying the final votes from national elections on Thursday, with former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu looking likely to reclaim the premiership with a comfortable majority backed by far-right allies. A last-minute surprise is still possible, though, if a small dovish group is able to sneak past the electoral threshold needed to enter parliament and hold back the size of Netanyahu's majority. But the likelihood was small, and members of the Netanyahu's team expected coalition were already jockeying for portfolios in what will be Israel's most right-wing government.
This could mean the end of the two-state solution and the consolidation of a system of one apartheid state. This is very dangerous. It means that the Israeli society opted for extreme racism and for killing any opportunity for peace.
I think the next Israeli government will seek escalation more than its predecessors, especially after the extreme right assumes power. But this is also linked to the absence of a political horizon.
And to other parts of the world, around 50 protesters gathered outside an immigration facility in the UK county of Kent, demonstrating against what they called wretched conditions endured by thousands of migrants inside. Manston, a former airfield in southeast England, is supposed to be a temporary processing center where new arrivals spend 24 hours before moving on to longer-term accommodation. But refugee groups say some people have been stuck there for weeks. Some families are sleeping in tents, and there have been reported cases of diphtheria and scabies.
So I'm hoping the guys on the front will accept all these toys, because there are children here who have been here for weeks. They're supposed to be here for 24 hours as a processing, but they're here for some of them for a month. So there's kids that need toys, they need something to entertain them. They're not getting it. It's bare, sterile conditions. Overcrowding, up to 4,000 people have been here.
And that's the news at 6 o'clock. But before we round off, a recap of stories that made the headlines. Federal government has inaugurated committee to tackle flood disaster in Nigeria. INEC has sworn in 19 resident electoral commissioners. And news from across the world, Ethiopia's civil war parties have agreed to end hostilities. The Citizen FM News 93.7 at 6 p.m. as edited by Lawrence Omoete. To listen to us online, please visit citizenfm.ng. I am Didi. Do stay with us.
Abuja.
Wake up.